Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glen Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. with Glen Sutherland. This week, my guest is Lindsey Davis. Lindsey, for people who don't know, want to give them a bit of an update or a little background on who you are?
Yeah, so I'm CEO of Spartan Invest, and we're a full-service turnkey company. We're based out of Birmingham, Alabama, but we sell properties to investors all over the country, the world, and we are in Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to get her back to talk about Tennessee and Georgia. What I wanted to talk about today is we're going to talk about Alabama. And the reason I want to do this is I just want to give everyone a bit of a background. I want to do some sort of market spotlights, and I want Canadians to realize that there are so many good markets in the U.S. because I keep hearing the same places over and over again. And I feel it's just that they don't know about other places and they see a podcast or they see the same specific Canadian podcasters pushing certain markets. And I don't think they realize that there's so many good markets out there. So anyway, Lindsey, I'll sort of turn this over to you. I might stop you every once in a while if I have a question, but tell us a bit about Alabama. Like, does it work to do rentals in Alabama? What's the laws like? Tell me everything.
Everything, just all things Alabama. Well, obviously I'm biased, and that majority of my properties that I personally own are in Alabama. Our company is based out of here, but the big questions that you're asking when you're analyzing a market are affordability, landlord friendliness, owner occupant, is there a healthy pool of tenants to actually rent your properties? These are all questions. What do the property taxes look like? And so if you're looking at your basic questions when looking at a market to invest in, Alabama just checks all of those boxes. The state of Alabama has one of the second lowest property tax of any other state in the country. So that's a big cost savings there for investors wanting to purchase and keep your cash flow elevated. It is extremely landlord friendly. And I can't stress this enough. If you're looking at states to invest in, please try to understand what their position, what the state and local municipalities' overall position is on the landlord and tenant friendliness. And do their laws and are their government policies going to support you in gaining access back to your property in the event that your tenant does not pay? What kind of red tape are you looking at? Because if you're comparing Alabama to say California, our average eviction time sits at right at about 70 days compared to California, where you can look upwards of about 12 to 16 months on the eviction process. So those are really important things to look at. And then you also got to take into consideration population growth and is it a growing market? Is it an emerging market? And then how affordable is it? What is your barrier to entry? And again, the Southeast just in general, Florida aside, Florida is its own beast, kind of like Texas is its own beast. Florida is its own beast. But when I say the Southeast, I'm talking about Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, those areas. Your barrier to entry to purchase a property is extremely low. And that our average property for sale in all of our Alabama markets combined is right at about $165,000. It's a little bit cheaper in your Birmingham area. It's a little bit more expensive in Huntsville, and I can talk a little bit about the reasons as to why that is. But our average for our investor clients is $165,000. So if you're financing the property, you're only out 20% of that, and then of course any closing costs. But that's just extremely affordable for your average W-2 employee that wants to invest in real estate.
Yeah, no, you just touched on a whole bunch of things there, right? And
so many things that I didn't even start talking about the demographics of the markets too. I could talk for days and days about how great Alabama is to invest in.
Yeah, no, even if you go through my podcast, I did a couple episodes but it was, I think, in 2021 where I was talking more about Huntsville specifically, but no, there's a lot of good stuff. We'll get there. But one thing is a couple things you touched on that I just want to push the point on, but the low property taxes. I think a lot of people don't even, when they're looking at their market, they don't even think to care or seem to care about those sort of numbers. And a lot of people are, maybe without dropping names, but you know what, I'm just going to drop the names. But a lot of people love Cleveland. And if they go and compare, like, for instance, I started off, my very first rental property was in Huntsville, Alabama, that I bought in the United States. And if you compare the property taxes on a similar asset or similar property in the two markets, it is phenomenally different. Like the Cleveland has one of the highest property taxes. It doesn't seem really high because the property values are super low, but what you don't realize is how much it actually impacts your cash flow by having really
Hmm.
high property taxes. So if you're paying like 800 a year versus 2,300 a year, it definitely
Absolutely.
is a huge difference on what
Yeah.
ends up in your cash flow, what actually ends up in your pocket. Are you looking to invest in the US? Are you looking for a coach that has been doing this for much more than 1 year? In fact, doing this for almost 10 years? Do you want to do one-on-one calls? Do you want to actually have someone looking at your deals and actually thinking and worrying about your projects? If that's of interest to you, I'd love to get on a phone call with you. Go to glensutherland.com or at canadianinvestingintheusa.com and schedule a call. We'll just do a quick 15 minutes, see if it works for you.
Absolutely. So if you look at where Birmingham is located in Jefferson County, right smack in the middle of Alabama. The Jefferson County, now it does change from city to city, that whatever that millage rate is. But for Jefferson County, which where majority of our properties are, the property tax rate is 0.64%. That's the average. So that's extremely, extremely low compared to Cleveland. I don't know what Cleveland's off the top of my head is percentage of sales, if you know that, but I mean
I
that's
don't have a handy, so I'd just be making it. I don't want to do that. But do look it up. Look it up if you're like planning on comparing markets. For the other thing you mentioned was like landlord friendly, right? And you talked about the evictions. The other thing that I often look at whenever I'm looking at determining if a property or a state is landlord friendly is the ability to do rent raises. Some places, like I know New Jersey and California, they have like rent control that allows only certain amount of raises, certain amounts every month or every year. Just like in Ontario, Canada, where I live, there's a cap. You can only raise it
Mhm.
a certain amount every single month. Do you want to talk about Alabama and the cap on what you can do each year?
Yeah, there is no cap. There is no rent cap in the state of Alabama or any of the other markets that we currently do business in. There is, however, a cap on how much the state or the county can increase your property tax. So they can only increase, that was just recently passed, that they can only increase it about 7 to 8%. I think it was over 5 years or so, because properties have been appreciating at such an accelerated rate over the last 5 years that the state, instead of putting a cap on rental rates, they put a cap on how much it's going to cost to own property in the state. So I think that alone states where the state is in general on its position for property ownership. And I think that says a lot. So there is no cap on how much you can increase rents. And it, like I said, it is not one of those states where a tenant can withhold. It's a constructive eviction, which is allowed. However, you cannot withhold maintenance expenses from the rent. And I know a lot of other tenant-friendly states will allow the resident to go do some repairs to their property and then withhold that amount from their rent. And in the state of Alabama, that is also not allowed. They have to follow the criteria in order to perform what they call a constructive eviction, where if the property is uninhabitable, then you have to go to court and be able to prove that in order to withhold any type of rent. So, I mean, there are protections in place that will always service the landlord, but also take care of the tenant, and that there are options. It is not strictly landlord. One of the other things that Alabama has recently passed is the squatters law. Now, this was passed originally in the state of Georgia. About a year and a half ago. Alabama passed it almost a year ago as well. And it has been a game changer, because beforehand, squatters' rights, where if you were to obtain occupancy of a property illegally, then you would call the cops out here. It's your property, and it would be what is considered a civil matter. And that's like, hey, you got to take that up in court. I'm not getting involved in that. And that's changed. It's like, if you are renting a property, at some point that property will become vacant. You're going to have to do some renovations to it. You're going to have to put it back on the market to to have it rented, and people can gain access. There's scammers out there that will forge a lease and move into a property. And you would have to go in front of a judge and say, hey, I need to evict this person, even though their lease was fake, and we had experienced that one time years prior. So this new squatters law, to where now all you have to do is prove that you own this property and this person is here illegally. Now it becomes a criminal matter and they can act fast. And I think, again, that just further states of the protections that the state puts in place for property owners.
Mm-hmm. And to go way back, so you said cap on property taxes and how much they can raise it. And that is actually another thing that a lot of people don't look at as well when they're looking at these, comparing markets to pick. And they don't realize how important that is. For instance, this year in Toledo, Ohio, what we had was they came through and they realized that the taxes were way behind, and almost all my taxes more than doubled in what they were annually. And they did a whole thing. And, what you had to do was you had to go to court to fight each one of these crazy raises. And like that, if they were just had it at like a steady rate, whereas, that's a reasonable request, right? But as a property investor, if what you want to do is control your expenses, right? Like that's one of the reasons that people go to the US. They like the 30-year mortgages instead of like, for a term instead of like the 5-year mortgages in Canada. You make stuff predictable for as far into the future as possible. It makes it a safer investment. You're not going to have big jumps, big expenses in those departments. There's always going to be repairs, but if you can limit that as much as you can by having, caps on what the property taxes could raise, caps on, all these different things, it's just going to make things run a little bit smoother. Did you know that there are more lending scams in the United States than anywhere else? I've actually come across many of them myself, and some of them are very good at looking legit. If you're interested in a list of lenders, please go to my website and get a list of verified lenders at CanadianInvestingInTheUSA.com/lenders.
Right. Absolutely. Sorry.
All good. All good. So maybe we, is there more stuff to talk about in Alabama, or do you want to switch?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can talk about the overall economy. And that's also something that you need to look at. Like, who are your large employers? One thing, and again, I hate bringing up COVID. I do. I'm so sick and tired of talking about it. I know everybody is. We're 5 years post-COVID. However, I think going back and looking at the stability of local economies through that time period tells you a lot about whether or not you should target a particular market. In that, the essential working force, in that, hey, Alabama, we know we're not sexy. People are not coming to Alabama to vacation. We're not the hot spot. However, we have a very diverse economy of companies that provide auto manufacturing, healthcare, facility services, financial institutions, all of these things that really help insulate the state's economy and make these jobs essential and long lasting. And that's also, we are the largest manufacturer, and Mercedes is located right in between Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. They produce the largest number of Mercedes in the whole world. It is located right here. They employ thousands and thousands of people. Huntsville, Alabama has been on, I don't even know how many lists. I honestly can't keep track. I used to know them all, but on how many list of best places to live, fastest growing economies, fastest population growth. It is one of the highest median household income, and that the average household income in Huntsville, Alabama sits at right at $88,000. And that's substantially larger. It's a lot bigger than Birmingham as well. There has been, they've got Cumming Research Park, which is home to 300 companies and over 30,000 jobs. It's FBI's headquarters is moving there. Facebook data centers, Toyota-Mazda manufacturing. There's just so much
military
growth.
NASA.
Military. Redstone Arsenal. Like, it's just, I could go on and on and on. Birmingham's largest employers, the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and their healthcare. It's just, there's so many different ways to have, the employment I guess I'm trying to say, I'm getting confused on my words here, but it's just very diverse and in the options. And so you don't want a extremely one entertainment focused area that could be damaged by one particular incident. And I think COVID is a really good example of that.
Yeah. No, it is one of the big reasons that I did buy my first property in Huntsville. When I was looking at it, I was like, look at all this stuff going in there. It was the Army base, the NASA, the FBI,
NASA,
Toyota, the Mazda. What else is there? Anyway, there was so much big industry, and they were moving in, and it was bringing high-paying jobs, and that's why they're, why they're
Boeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget. Like I forget them. There's so many of them that are moving and growing into North Alabama.
Yeah. No. So I feel like they took a blueprint from a different state and they copied it and did it just as well. We'll talk about that in another part, another one. But I think that like Northern Alabama, they did a great job of like providing tax incentives to some of these big businesses to come in, and it's changed the market. Even like I've been investing in Huntsville since 2016. And just even seeing what the cheapest property that you could possibly buy on the MLS compared to the cheapest property you can buy on the MLS now is completely different. Like when money comes in, what happens is areas get fixed up, and the areas all of them become better and more attractive. And when you have people making more money, there's more pride in ownership, and there's honestly less tenants and more owners of property, which overall tends to make a whole city look a lot better. And these aren't big cities too. Maybe we talk about the size of these cities.
Yeah, so I mean, they're not huge. Now, Huntsville has surpassed this overall size. It was actually supposed to be the most populated city in the state by this year, 2025, and it actually kind of passed that. It beat out Birmingham about 3 or 4 years ago. But if you look at just the localized population of Huntsville proper, which again, you've got to take a step back. You've got to look at the Athens and Decatur, those areas. That's where your Toyota-Mazda manufacturer is on kind of on the outskirts. But just the downtown, it's over half a million. But if you take a stretch out, you're almost at 2 million. And same with Jefferson County, and that if you're looking at the Jefferson County surrounding of the suburbs, it's at about 1.7. So it just finally passed Birmingham.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I was hard listening. I forgot to think about a question.
Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah, what an interviewer. Yeah, I don't know. What else is there that people should know about the area, or anything Huntsville, anything Birmingham? I don't know. Maybe I'll edit that out.
No, I mean, I think that just asking kind of what makes a rental property successful. And I think asking those questions before you start in the market. And a lot of times these decisions are made from an emotional standpoint. And it's like, well, I really love Dallas. I love that. And I've just heard more about it, and making those decisions for not the right reasons. So asking yourself the questions of like, what is going to make my rental property more successful? And when you get to the things that you need to ask in the market, I think that the ones we talked about a little bit earlier, it's like, hey, how much is it going to cost?
Yep.
How much is it going to cost me long-term? Property taxes, upfront, purchase price, your rent to sale price ratio is another very big, important key factor. And that, the whole 1% rule, that's hard. That's really hard to get right now. That's been the rule of thumb, and that you want your rent to be 1% of your sales price. That's been very challenging, just given the inflationary and then a high appreciation that we've seen. However, Alabama is able to provide really, really close. We're at about that 0.8%, which is extremely rare right now. Most of your other markets sit anywhere from the 0.6 to 0.7. So we're very close to getting you to that 1%. And all that's going to do is you go ahead and purchase, and it's going to continue to appreciate. Your rent's going to continue to increase, and you will get there. And so I think just asking the questions of what I want in my real estate portfolio, and just making sure that the market checks those boxes.
Yeah, I honestly don't like that 1% rule at all, Because
I don't either, but yeah, I've heard it a million times over the years. I mean,
people
it's just
use it as such a quick litmus test to try and compare markets,
yes.
but it doesn't that doesn't work because it doesn't involve all the other expenses, and some of the other expenses vary a lot from state to state. Like we were talking about at the start.
Well, I could go find you I could go find you a property right now in the state of Alabama to where you're going to get that 1% rule. But it doesn't necessarily make it a great investment, So that property may not have been renovated or anything like that. It could be on the market right now. It's not a Spartan Invest house, but it could be on the market available for purchase right now, and you're going to be able to get that 1%, but it's also in an area to where you're not going to be able to rent to an open market tenant. You're going to have to take on a Section 8. That's going to be a requirement of you. You're going to have to deal with a lot of vandalism. There's a lot of other things at play. It is not just the 1% that you need to take into consideration.
Yep. No, totally agree. And you just mentioned Spartan Invest a few times in there. So people are like, hey, what is she talking about? Tell us a bit about your company, how they can reach out to you, how they can connect with you, and what you guys do.
Yeah, so we're a full service turnkey company. So we are based, our headquarters are in Birmingham, Alabama. We are purchasing properties, renovating them to our standards, and then we have a property management company in-house, all in the same building, that is going to manage that property after we're done with the renovations. And then we sell those properties to investor clients. And our goal is to provide mailbox money to investors. We're going to handle everything. We're going to have somebody walk you through the choosing property process of our inventory. We're going to have somebody walk you through your property management Appfolio software. So we are set up to be your boots on the ground. So you can invest in Alabama without having to necessarily be here, without having to necessarily build your own team. And that's our goal.
I love it. Well, Lindsay, like always, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I think you gave a really good insight on what's going on there. And I think if people who hadn't heard or even thought about investing in Alabama are definitely going to give it a second look.
Yeah, I hope so. And if you're listening to this, you're like, man, I don't know, this girl's got the country accent. I'm not 100% sure I can believe her. I love
the Alabama accent.
Go online and just research, hey, what markets are ideal for investing, and take a look at Alabama and look at some of the numbers, look at what other people are saying as well, and look at, your property tax rates. All of that is available online. So please check it out to learn more. And then if you want to learn more about Spartan Invest, we're online as well. So is our available inventory. You can check out our website. And on our website, we have market reports. So we have a breakdown of every single market that we're in, what zip codes we buy in those markets, why we target those particular zip codes, et cetera. So there's a ton of information on the markets on our website as well.
I love it. I love that information. So thank you so much. Oh, also, if you are listening to this and you're like, I want a second opinion, just email me, because I invest in Alabama. I've done Birmingham, I've done Huntsville, and I've also done all kinds of other markets. So I can tell you about the advantages of working in Alabama if you're curious. So like always, Lindsay, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It's great.
That was a nice video. Bye.